Welcome back to Secret Weapons. My name is Mark Johnston. If this is your first time here, this is a YouTube channel where we do gear demos and reviews, as well as studio tips and tricks for leveling up your writing, playing, and production from the perspective of a guitar player working out of a home studio. If that's the kind of thing that would appeal to you, I would love it if you would hit that subscribe button and stick around for future videos. Today we're taking a look at the 29 Pedals TOKI Fuzz. 29 Pedals is one of the most consistent brands that has appeared on my boards over the last couple of years, with the EUNA being a mainstay, indispensable, literal secret weapon for me. Early on, I had it as an always-on with the harmonic and bass boost switches in the up positions for imbuing sparkle and body to my vintage Mustang for ambient compositions, and in the modern context, it still lives as a totally indispensable, but albeit much more subtle, piece of my signal flow on everything I do. But today we're taking a look at something much less subtle from 29 Pedals, but with the spoiler that it actually can be as well, and that is TOKI. This is a vintage voiced fuzz / overdrive pedal from 29, and it has a lot of really interesting things under the hood. So let's talk about the feature set. The TOKI gets its clipping and its overdrive and fuzz tones from kind of cascading gain stages in this device. And the way that you kind of create interplay between those various gain stages is really interesting. You have an input trim control, which is basically going to be a passive buffer that allows you to hit the pedal at full strength or progressively reduce the amount that you hit the first gain stage in the pedal. In that cascading gain stage series, you have a pad control that can be switched from an off position, on position, or on but with a bright boost. And that's going to be an additional volume pad in between your first and second gain stages. From there, you have a second gain stage controlled with the high, low, and bright switch on the far right side of the pedal. This is basically going to set the gain amount for that secondary gain stage. So you basically have the ability to decide how hard you want to hit gain stage 1, how hard and how brightly you want to hit gain stage 2, and then how much gain you want in that second gain stage. The control scheme there is fairly straightforward, but offers a lot of interplay in terms of the way that your signal kind of impacts each of the gain stages in this thing, giving you different flavors and shapes of overdrive. There's a difference between hitting the first gain stage hard and giving the second gain stage a break versus the opposite, where you can hit the first one with a little bit less intensity, a little less low-end flab as a result, but kind of hit full strength going into that second gain stage for something with a little bit more shred to it. Like I said, the pad and the gain controls on this thing have a off and high position, and then from there they have on, and then on but bright, and low but bright. And those bright stages in those are really something. You can get very sharp, fizzy, angular 70s fuzz tones by turning both of those bright switches on, which brings us to the other really high value and really kind of unconventional tone shaping approach in TOKI, and that is the CMP control. CMP in this context does not stand for compressor or compression, but is instead a switchable capacitive load control. And so basically what that is the kind of like input resistance, like your impedance control effectively in the pedal. And if you've ever dealt with like high-end studio gear, they will often have a impedance control or a tone control on the face of a microphone preamp. And by switching up to a higher or lower impedance control, you can change the kind of top-end character of the microphone or input source you're using. This is that same kind of principle where you can switch between 100, 200, or 570 on that CMP control. And this will, for its credit, adjust the kind of high-end response of your signal, getting progressively darker as you step up that value. And it's really worth noting that those three settings are very well tuned. The 100 value, the lowest value or the brightest setting, is going to be very natural sounding. It's going to feel like a very unaltered version of your signal, whereas 200 is going to kind of just tame down the most musically perfect amount of kind of sharpness in the treble. And then 570 is going to give you a properly dark, warm, woolly sound. However, with those bright controls available to you, that all ends up playing together really nicely to offer up a lot of different approaches to similar sounds. Much like the gain staging approach, you can kind of set where you want that brightness to come in and where you want that high end to be kind of shelved down or tamped down in ways that allow you to achieve similar ideas of tones, but with different character. And of course, once you have all of your trim, pad, gain, and CMP controls dialed, once you have that kind of perfect cascaded gain staging and tone control set, the level control is going to be an IC-based output master level control. And of course, this is true bypass. The build quality is in line with everything that you've ever seen from 29 pedals, including the whatever power supply on the back, which I believe we've talked about this in past videos, but you can put any power supply into the back of this, 9 volt, 12 volt, 18 volt, theoretically 800 million volt. I probably wouldn't do that, but it will self-regulate internally down to 9 volt, which means you basically cannot blow this thing, which is awesome. It's a testament to 29 pedals kind of commitment to build quality, commitment to using high quality components in their devices. I've been using their stuff for a long time and very frequently, and I'm always so impressed. I love the design, I love the color. I think that much like with the Flower Overdrive Toki is a great example of creative limitations giving you access to tones you wouldn't otherwise reach for. If I just had a tone sweep control that progressively darkened my signal, I don't know that I would land perfectly at the 200 and 570 settings. I also don't know that I would lean into a really brittle sounding bright set and then use those 2 and 570 values to try to kind of counterbalance, arriving at really interesting sounds I wouldn't otherwise use. So I think that's enough talking about it. I think Toki sounds great. I think we should throw it back on the pedal board and give it a listen. So as always, before we get into our sound samples, let's talk through the signal chain and the context we are working in. I am playing my Fender 52 reissue Telecaster into the 29 pedals EUNA, the Ross compressor, and the 29 pedals JFET and Toki. We're then going to the Strymon El Cap and the Strymon Bigsky and then outdoor amplifier, which is my Benson Monarch Plus. We're recording into the Universal Audio aux box and through a pair of Warm Audio 273 EQ preamps. Here's our clean tone. So the controls on the Toki are actually very straightforward, but it's designed to have a lot of interplay. So we're going to walk through each of the individual controls fairly quickly, and then we'll take a look at how you can kind of mix and match to create your ideal sounds. But before we get into that, let's go ahead and just hear the Toki all on its own at what I would consider to be a good starting place, which is trim all the way up, level at noon, CMP at 100, pad off, and gain at low. So obviously we are already working with a ton of gain on tap. And so to that end, let's go ahead and take a look at the trim control. This is a passive adjustable pad at the input stage of the pedal and will basically let you get anywhere from pretty raucous distortion and fuzz tones, even in the low gain stage for that second gain stage, all the way down to kind of really warm, mellow, overdrive as fuzz sounds. So let's start dialing that trim back. we're now at minimum for trim. I would say that this is already at a place of a pretty killer, always-on style kind of tone shaper. So like flat and dry. Even taking level down to match. So let's take trim back up to about halfway. So let's take a look at this CMP control, which is effectively a capacitive load adjustment. And you can think of it as the kind of resistance to the signal flowing through the circuit, kind of like an impedance control, where a lower value is less resistance to the signal flow and therefore lets more top end through. There's a lot of implementations of this throughout the world of high-end studio gear, pieces that will give you like more than one impedance level control at the input stage or somewhere in the circuit that will change the character of the mic or signal going into it. And here it's basically that same principle but applied for your guitar. So at 100 you have the least resistance to signal flow, and as a result you have the most top end available. And as you step up to 200 and to 570, you will cut progressively more treble from your signal. So 100 and 200 are both very natural sounding. 200 is a really effective place for brighter single coils or for amplifiers with a lot of top end sparkle and treble to them, for avoiding that just hair of kind of additional harshness that you can get from high gain pedals like this. But as we kind of circle back around to the more tone shaping side of things, all three of those settings will reveal themselves to be very valuable. Let's step through them one more time before we move on though, with some lower chords to kind of hear how you can get more or less crackle in the kind of fuzz circuit on like low chords and picked arpeggiated chords. let's talk about pad and gain. So these are going to be very similar sets of switches on this pedal in that they are both basically two position with a third position that is the second position with a bright control added to it. The pad itself is going to be very much like the input trim in that it's a passive volume pad, but whereas the trim is fully adjustable and at the input stage of the pedal, pad is in between the two gain stages and offers you kind of full signal, a reduced signal in the on position, or that same reduced signal but with a treble boost in the bright position, which is the BR control. And like I said, gain is going to be a similar relationship where you have your high gain position, your low gain, and then your low gain with additional treble kind of like injected into your signal. We've been on low this entire time for a little bit more articulation and a little bit more of a sense of how trim dials back to clean tones. So let's go ahead and step up to the high gain for that second gain stage in this device. So as you can hear, the bright stage on the gain switch is going to be kind of the most hairy of all of them. A lot of string noise, a lot of teeth. So those are the kind of core controls across the face of Toki. Let's talk about how they interact to kind of dial in the exact sound that you want. Starting with some kind of general EQ controls. Obviously, you can stack the bright switches across both pad and gain. Let's go ahead and turn both of those on so we're getting something really hairy and aggressive and angular. And then let's go ahead and look at that CMP capacitive control to go ahead and dial that back into a different form of kind of warm guitar tone, bright guitar tone, or mellow guitar tone. That's a lot of treble. So yeah, that 570 would otherwise be a pretty like mellow and dark tone, not without its merits, of course. But if you crank on both of those bright switches and have that in the 100, something like a neck telly pickup can get really insane. Pretty glassy. And that's a different kind of treble and tone shaping than the lower CMP control with bright switches turned back off. And likewise, let's go ahead and take a look at how you can interplay those two different trim controls with that final gain switch to find different combinations of gain staging for different fuzz, distortion, and overdrive textures in here. So as you can hear, the difference between hitting full volume at the start of the circuit and dialing that back, but hitting the second circuit at full volume gives you different texture. There's more low-end roundness. There's more kind of flabby presence to maxed out trim control versus dialing that back to a halfway point. But letting that second gain stage hit at full volume. Or going to full gain on that second gain stage and just kind of cascading up with softer controls at trim and pad. Let's start with trim at 0, pad in the on position, but that full gain stage. So there's full gain on the Toki. One final thing I want to point out is we've made a lot of hay in the last couple of minutes about the difference between the trim's impact on the kind of dual gain staging in this thing and the pad's relative impact. One other final thing is you can always find other ways to hit a pedal like this. It stacks well. So because the input trim is a pretty flat response, you can further adjust the kind of character of something like this as a fuzz pedal. Let's give it some breathing room. High final gain stage, intermediary pad, input pad, all kind of attenuating our signal down. And then let's look at something like the JFET with just a slight volume boost. So JFET. So we've covered the JFET before on this show, and there's 3 settings to it. There are the X, the N, and the F. Full F is going to be full, which is just full frequency range. N is going to be normal, which is a slight low-end attenuation in the boost, so more kind of treble presence as a boost pedal. And then X is going to be something like an expander, where it's aggressively flat from very, very low to very, very high, and can make single coils feel very big and full-featured, which is very fun. So let's go ahead and disable the JFET, turn the Toki back on, and then we'll walk through those 3 different settings to hear how different boosted EQ frequencies ahead of something like this can further tone shape the fuzz response in this. We'll start with normal. Jump to full. If you made it to the end of this video, thank you so much for watching. I would love to know, what do you think of Toki? What do you think of this kind of approach to pedal design, the creativity through limitations design of these switches alongside the knobs? Sound off in the comments. I'm always curious to hear what you guys think of the gear we cover on this channel. Thank you for watching once again, and I will see you in the next one.